So we're going to do a case study of the show First Contact. And please welcome Jeff Peeler, president at Frantic Films and past chair of On-Screen Manitoba, who's going to moderate the session.
Thank you. Hello. Is that on? Hello? You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I can't.
I know, I just heard it.
Okay. Which is fine. I don't need to hear it. I can hear myself. Also, forgive me because I'm of that age now, sadly, where my glasses go on and off. So forgive me for that. I also wanted to, of course, start, especially with this panel, by acknowledging that we're gathered here on Treaty 1 land, and I wanted to thank the people of this territory for receiving us this afternoon. So thank you for that. Our panelists are Vanessa Loewen from Animiki Digital Productions Inc., executive producer and producer of First Contact. We have a special guest, Michael Redhead Champagne, who is a community organizer, public speaker, a proud member of the Shamattawa Cree Nation, and was a participant in episode number 1, I believe, of the series. And Jeff Newman from Nüman Films, who is an executive producer, writer, director of First Contact. So thank you all for joining us. For those of you that saw in the agenda, Stephanie Scott from Indios Productions was not able to join us, and Michael very graciously stepped in at the last minute, so we'll be kind to him. You know what, we'll be kind to everyone, I suppose, right? I guess I'm going to single you out. So the purpose of this panel is to have a candid discussion around the experience of developing and co-producing First Contact for APTN. Acknowledging as well that TVO and the Canada Media Fund had a role in supporting the production. For those of you that may not be familiar with the series, I think it would be a good idea just to start off by playing the trailer, which I believe we brought.
I think of alcoholism, I think of drug abuse.
A whole bunch of partying and flop houses.
They just always get money and handouts.
How are they the worst off when they're given so much?
We are being made to pay for something that we didn't do.
Where's my money going?
They don't paint their houses, they don't fix windows.
Welfare's not a career.
They're angry at white people.
I mean, they want you to feel sorry for them.
Get off your ass if you're unhappy and go do something about it.
Feels like it's just a lost cause at this point.
I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all of you to my community so that you can see with your own eyes, experience with your own bodies, and feel with your own hearts what this community is really about.
This could be not so bad, it could be good, or it could be like, holy, what did I just sign up for?
I have not been to a reservation ever.
We are gonna stick out like sore thumbs.
It's just our way of life, and we just try and maintain it as best we can.
There, you got him. Go, 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 go.
If I was to stay at one of those homes, I would find a place to go and take a shower first thing in the morning.
Welcome to Winnipeg's North End.
It is very scary. For one, I'm the minority here.
We're really looking at the long-term effects of a genocide.
There's lots of things that happen in the world. We've got to look ahead.
I'm just having a very hard time understanding.
That's not an excuse. You're a prime example of society.
Just want this day to be over with. This is camping for them. For me, it's like hell on earth.
We're not going anywhere. We've always been here. But how can we reconcile? How can we stand together?
Thanks for coming to my community.
I had no idea. It really puts a dark stain on the Canada that I thought I knew.
I came here with ignorant views, and you know what? I was wrong.
Welcome to Muscat Dam.
I've never felt so foreign in my own country.
Just having you here is a good thing.
A lot of our stories are similar.
You know that old saying, walk a mile in my shoes and you'll understand. And we'll get there. I'll just say one heart at a time.
So, as one producer, as one storyteller to another, I mean, a heartfelt congratulations for bringing such an important issue to the fore in Canada to stimulate discussion, and what an amazing series. So, congratulations, first and foremost.
Thanks, Jeff.
So, Vanessa, there was a long history behind bringing this, well, I'll just say the format. Obviously, there's a long history to this story coming to the fore in Canada. But from the format, there's a long history there. Can you run us through, I guess, the origins of this project?
For sure. Am I okay? Oh yeah,
You're on.
I'm on. So in 2014, I think a friend sent me the trailer for the New Zealand version of the show. So the New Zealand trailer was very similar to what you just saw. And
Australia. Just to
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Whoa.
It's close.
I'm just gonna ride out this baby brain thing.
I got your back.
So Australian trailer, and it's so weird. Like, yeah, it was late in the afternoon.
I have it on my piece of paper and didn't correct you either. So.
Oh, and it stopped playing, and I just sat there, and I was stunned. And as a storyteller and as a Métis woman, I was just like, we're ready. We're ready for this. We're just ready for, I mean, obviously racism in Canada, in my opinion, has also been a dirty little secret in terms of racism towards the community. And you kind of always want to kick it into like how do we stop this? And I just felt like they did a great job. So I emailed the company immediately. They're a very well-known Australian production company, Blackfella Films. I knew them from the industry. They produce Redfern Now and a few other good shows. And I just said, I want your show, which was a little bit maybe rash, but in the end, it was the right thing to do.
What was their first reaction to that?
They were like, I was like, I want to buy your format. And it was kind of like, it's not a format. And I'm like, I know, but actually it ended up that it was kind of a format. They made the show for SBS in Australia, and there had been a show called Go Back Where You Came From, which was about refugees who entered the country and also experienced a lot of discrimination. And they sent people on a journey to follow the journey of what it would be like for a refugee that comes on a boat to Australia. And my understanding is that SBS wanted an Aboriginal version and approached Blackfella and said, could you copy the format of Go Back Where You Came From? So it actually kind of was a format. But at first they were like, what do you mean you want the format? And I was like, I want to copy your show. Like, I'm an Indigenous producer from Canada, and we're ready for this too. So that's where I think Jeff is saying it was a long time. At that point, we started having discussions. We talked about what I would want from them. I told them I wanted a Bible and a certain amount of consultation. For me, it was important not to just try to make the Canadian version, because I felt like I personally spend a lot of time traveling the world at Indigenous events where there's a lot of knowledge sharing, and out of interest of self-determination and telling our own stories, I felt like they had done so much work to tell a story that is so painful and so difficult, and actually still is. Michael and I were, just as the trailer's playing, like, you still, it's hard to watch, and it's hard, like, and I thought, I have to honor my brothers and sisters and the work that they did, and we have to carry each other, and that's just part of our sensibilities as, I think, Indigenous creators. So that's kind of why I got them to do the Bible and stuff rather than just making a Canadian version, because, you know, like, if we made a mistake, it's a really bad mistake that you can never undo. This show is triggering and traumatic for everybody involved, Native and non-Native, and why would I risk that when the Australians had done it right and done such a good job?
So, I mean, that brings up an interesting point, because often we in this industry see formats, shows, we think we can, you know, once we start to develop it ourselves, that it's going to change so much that it's not necessarily worth buying a format and taking that risk. But how much of a partnership was it working with them throughout that whole development process? How much back and forth was there?
Well, they supplied a fantastic Bible that gave a lot of information, and a lot of information about, they were very candid about mistakes they felt they had made and how they would do things differently. So they were very candid with us about that. And then Stephanie and myself had a couple of calls with them and emails, just more in our development phase, talking about the approach, and they really provided encouragement. Like when I say that it was a very emotional journey, it was really hard, especially for Stephanie and I. The responsibility we felt weighed on us heavily, and their encouragement helped us, and making sure that we did it right, and preparing us for what to expect. So I think those are the ways it paid off the most, them helping to just prepare us for what was going to come. Their knowledge was invaluable.
And then this became a three-way partnership between three companies.
Yeah.
So could you let us know what Animiki's relationship is with APTN, and then walk us through the process of bringing in Stephanie and Mr. Newman?
For sure. So Animiki is a wholly owned subsidiary of APTN. So we create vested interest content always with partnerships from within the community. So it's our goal to work with other Indigenous producers to create a variety of shows. Aboriginal Day Live would be a good example of a vested interest program. That's a show that used to just solely be done by APTN, but as it grew in popularity, and eventually we partnered with the Cléments and Rivard to make it a bigger, we were able to access CMF and tax credits and make it a bigger event. So vested interest programs is what we do, always with partners. So I immediately approached Stephanie. We'd worked together on a show years ago, and her background as a journalist, she's a First Nations woman from Winnipeg, who I value and love and adore as a sister, and I just knew she'd be the right partner to help me do this and make sure we did it right. And like she works for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, so her depth of knowledge in her travels and her journeys through that work really came in useful, and so I just knew that she was the right partner. And then we knew that we needed to have non-Indigenous crew due to triggering and other sensitive issues. So Nüman Films was the obvious choice. I know Jeff for many years. I know his work. I know his sensitivities and his openness to learn, and a willingness to be led by us as well, I think, and us by him in terms of his storytelling. So he was just a natural fit with Jocelyn from his company. So we were thrilled to have ultimately a production company that was wholly Manitoba owned. It was owned by two Indigenous operated and run companies, two women-owned operated companies, and then another Manitoba company by Jeff. So we made a great team.
In order to talk about the casting a little bit, can you expand a bit on the idea, and maybe Jeff can also weigh in on the decision to have a non-Indigenous crew in the field? Because I think it's an important, it's not something that would have necessarily immediately jumped out at me as a non-Indigenous person to think through the ramifications of that. So do you want to maybe address that, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes against what you might think going into a production like this, what you would want. Obviously, we want to have as much Indigenous representation within the crew and production of the show as possible. But when considering the circumstances of having six,
racist.
Yeah, for lack of a better term.
Sometimes it's okay.
For sure, to put them in a situation where spending 28 days with them, 28 straight days, traveling amongst, we want to make sure that those six feel comfortable in an environment with people that they can relate to, white people, to be blunt about it, and they can feel comfortable saying what they need to say, because one of the most important things of the show was giving these people an opportunity to share what they really felt and what they really thought. And the only way we could really do that is by putting them in a situation where they could do that. And in every scene, not in every scene, but in every situation that we would go to a community, obviously they'd be having dialogue and communicating with the local members of those Indigenous communities. But driving to locations in the vans, that's usually where most of the most interesting and despicable stuff would come out, because again, they'd feel comfortable. So that's what it was. And I know that I was a little surprised by that as well when it started. But once the rationale was given, again, I give credit to the Australian concept to doing that, to give us that idea to do that, because it turned out to be huge. It turned out to be really important.
Michael, when did you first hear about the project?
I first heard about the project by email. Angie Lamarand sent it to me, I think, after it was sent. I'm not sure which one of you guys did it, but I remember watching the, what's that thing called, trailer? The trailer for the Australian version, and wanting to flip a table when I was watching that. I want to flip the table, wanted to throw things, and I was immediately offended. I'm like, I don't want no part of this. This is a horrific, enraging, how on earth could this be a real thing? What the heck? So that was my original thought process when it came to me. But then, had to, revisit that, and I was like, maybe go through my thought process as well as my emotional process. And I was thinking, okay, is this pulling back the covers? Is this revealing something that needs to be revealed? And also the question of, if I don't do it, someone's gonna do it. And so for me, I was like, all right, well, I feel a sense of responsibility to my community here in Winnipeg. I want First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people here in this city, especially in the inner city, to feel represented, to feel that when they look at productions like this, they feel like they're a part of it or they're in it. And so for me, it was a tough decision, but ultimately I thought that I have to kind of get over my personal feelings of discomfort and go for what I know is a bigger picture objective, and that's, revealing racism in Canada and calling Indigenous and non-Indigenous people together so that we can do something about it. I know that it was really tough for me, being the first contact of first contact. And so that was very trying for me. So I know it was my job to simply ask the question of, hey, how do you feel about Indigenous people? And then it was my job to sit there and listen. It was so hard. It was so hard to listen to the things that those folks are saying about me, about my relatives, about my community that is so generous and kind and has taken care of me my entire life and continues in the face of immense systemic and structural barriers to still be generous and kind. So it was really tough for me to hear the things that they were saying, but I also knew that I had a responsibility to represent my community in the way that they taught me. And that was, be firm and do what's necessary in the moment to achieve our outcome. And our outcome at this point was to name the racism that is literally killing Indigenous people in this country. And if we can't name it, we can't fight it. And so I'm really happy that we've been able to work with such fantastic partners so we could name the beast that we all need to fight together.
So after that, was it just one day of filming when you met the participants?
I only got to hang out with them the one day.
Okay. So how did you feel after that?
I just wanted, before you answer that question, I just wanted to jump in and say how Michael isn't kidding in terms of he really was the first. I'm really glad you're here, by the way, because we didn't really know what to expect when we took these 6 people. We knew what we wanted to get out of the scene. Michael had talked it through, but when it happened, I mean, it was like an assault, and Michael really took the brunt, and I didn't really realize the impact or the potential power of what we were doing until that day happened. And, we didn't really, I personally take responsibility for not helping you enough after. Because I remember when it was done, I was so concerned about getting the scene that, Michael had just gone through all this and they were like, okay, thanks, see you later. And it was a big learning process for me. Michael called me after, he's like, that was really heavy. That was really, really difficult, and you gotta understand what you're doing here. And suddenly I felt this immense weight of what we were really doing. And I knew it was important what we were doing, but I didn't really know until we started into it. So it was a really, really difficult, powerful start. And again, that you stuck with us all the way through that. And you were a huge gatekeeper as well to opening up other doors. So that's appreciated. So I just wanted to get that out there.
Well, also that was a moment where I was able to communicate to you that as you guys go forward on this journey, I know how I felt. And I just was thinking forward to all of the other hosts that were going to encounter these folks. And so I was very happy to have that conversation with you about, like, what are we going to do to make sure that we're taking care of our relatives all throughout this journey, because we're essentially exposing, even though they're strong, capable, and competent, we are essentially exposing Indigenous hosts across Canada to racism that they actually see every single day. They see those attitudes in their day-to-day life, and so it's a very, it's going to be a very triggering thing for every single host that was a part of that. And so I was really happy to have that conversation. It was encouraging to me that, the production folks were open and willing to have that conversation.
Did it change your process going forward and how you were working with the hosts in other locations?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was something that we were extremely aware of at that point, and we wanted to make sure that we followed up with communities after, that we set them up in advance. They always had the power, in the sense of if things weren't going the way they wanted, then we would back off, or we would stop. The last thing we wanted to do was traumatize communities, and that never happened. I think that usually, most of the time, it went sort of opposite as your experiences. They were really set up for something pretty awful that was going to happen, and then when it came in, they were really quite relieved. So it was a really amazing experience to be able to go through that and see that. But it was.
And I'll just say also, they did evolve. They were evolving.
They were, absolutely.
So also, further to that, everybody's host experience would have ultimately gotten a little bit lighter and lighter in terms of trauma, because much to the point of why we wanted to do this, people started to crack and see change. Most of them did. So to Michael's point, he was the first contact, and that's a horrible position. So you're a good man. Because they did have this evolution. So it did get a little bit easier. And it did also, there is a season 2, it's public, I think it's not a secret. And it really also.
Well, it's not now.
It's not now, yeah. So, and it really set us up for season 2 and how we handled the site visits at first. Like, we had site visits and stuff the first time, but I think sometimes when you're in it and it's so heightened, there's so many things to remember about how to care for yourself and for others that is just, so I think in season 2 we were a little bit better versed, I will say.
Yeah,
I felt that way.
We learned.
Yeah.
And how hard was it to get hosts to participate from each of these communities when you approached them with the idea? Was it a similar reaction to what Michael had at first?
Well, I mean, we had a lot of different communities, different regions, different parts of the country, different sensibilities. Many places were like, we've been waiting for this for a long time. It's about time. Some communities didn't want to participate. They didn't see the value in it. They didn't see, maybe in some cases, I don't know if they were ready. I don't know they just weren't. They didn't want to do it. So, but for the most part, our success rate, if you want to look at that, was pretty high. Most communities were extremely welcoming, extremely willing to participate. And again, it was a big risk for these communities to come on board. Again, like same with Michael, right? It's one thing, you can see the Australian trailer. We didn't really share the Australian trailer with communities. We just talked to them, and as is so often in the case with Indigenous communities, we had to go there in person and meet and sit down and talk. And with Stephanie Scott, often was with us. Ian Bawa, who's sitting over here, he would join us on talking to these communities, and we'd spend a few days there, get to know them, let them get to know us, and know that what our intentions really were. And our intentions were, again, to give them a voice, give them the power to be able to get their story out. And our participants are there as a vehicle and to trigger certain questions or talking points, but really it's about giving that voice that isn't often enough been given opportunity to get out.
So let's talk about casting of the actual participants, the travelers, I think they were called in the series. Pardon me. What was that process like? I can imagine that was a very difficult process. Casting any show is difficult.
Well, I mean, a huge amount of credit needs to go to Jocelyn Mitchell on that. She really spearheaded a lot of that. We all participated, and particularly Vanessa and Stephanie. But trying to find them was a unique process. Again, having Australia, having done it before, they had some suggestions in terms of how we do it. But really, we just cast a wide net using. We had a great. A casting agent out of Toronto that basically we were looking for people that were willing to go on an adventure, that had really strong opinions, and that's how we found the people that wanted to be on TV, that weren't afraid to put their opinions out there, and we just asked them a wide range of questions. You know, what do you think about Trump? What do you think about immigrants? What do you think about Indigenous people? And we'd sort of mix this up, and over time we would just sort of filter it down into these characters, and they didn't know where they were going or what they were doing as a setup in the show. But within the last 10 days or so, they did know that it was an Indigenous themed production. They did know they were traveling the country. They didn't know exactly what that meant and how we would go about it. But really, they didn't know about each other. They didn't know that they really went in quite blind. But it wasn't any different than casting another show, except for the fact that we wanted to extract this one facet of their personality out through without giving it away off the top.
Did any one of them have second thoughts in that last 10 days when more information became available to them?
They didn't, but we did have one girl that I always remember from casting who, when she found out, she backed out, and we knew why.
Right.
Like, she was so racist. And anyway, there was a few factors in her life that I felt that she was pretty sure that, like, her house might get firebombed if she was really...
Well, again, it's trying to find, I mean, trying to be careful about finding people that didn't come, that we felt, one, had the ability to potentially transform, two, that they came from a place of ignorance, not of hate. So that if it was purely angry, venomous hatred, we weren't interested in that. I mean, it's hard enough with the 6 that we had. You know.
And I'll say that we did, like, and it's better that girl didn't do it. Like, she just, I'm exaggerating, but, like, she was quite racist, and I think she was like, I know what I'm going to be in for, and I don't want to do it. At least that was our sense when she backed out. That said, the Australians were very specific as well. This was that when they did the psychological testing, of course, we had a responsibility, as Jeff said, to make sure that people would change. We're not going to send 6 racist people into our communities and have them not change and have them perpetuate further trauma. So the Australians had said, you kind of want your psych tests to come back like this. I don't mind sharing that.
No, yeah, absolutely.
At this point. And so we knew of our 6 who had the propensity for change and who might not. I mean, I couldn't live with myself if we had sent 6 that had no propensity for change. And the way that it happened by the end of season 3, it was pretty on par with what the psychologist said in the evaluation. So we were very responsible, I think, in that way where, and back to like whether or not people backed out, the people who say this stuff, as we're learning from what's happening in the States, like people who have these completely insane opinions love to share them. They love it. People are like, how did you find them? How did you get people to say? First of all, people say this stuff every day. I hear it every day. It's not, you might not hear it because this is what I mean about Canada's dirty secret. And second of all, most of the time, these people love to shout it from the rooftops, what they think. It's not that hard, sadly.
Yeah, that was one of our biggest questions is how did you get them to say what they say and why would they put themselves out there? And the fact is that they all felt what they were saying was the right thing. So it was very easy to get, we didn't have to prompt them. The only time I'd have to prompt them, quite frankly, was in a situation, if they're in someone's home, say, and I know that they don't agree, because again, the first thing that we did is we would do a home visit with them. We would do a main interview where they would say everything that they think, so then we could leverage that as knowing how they feel in a situation, so then I could call them out and say, well, you told me this before, knowing that I had a record of it, and then put them on the spot to bring it up. That did happen on a couple of occasions, but not very often. Most of the time they would just say it.
Yeah, and as you know, if you've seen the show, not everybody did change. And again, in terms of the responsibility, less than half didn't change, but that's also the reality. Some people simply aren't going to change. It doesn't matter how much education, how much opportunity for empathy you give some people, they're simply not going to change, and that's the reality. But if we can get those numbers down from 6 to 2, which I feel we did, then we're that many steps ahead for change in the country as a whole. So ultimately, it was still worth it.
Would you agree you saw movement for those that didn't change per se? No?
I would argue that yes, and I'll give one example. The two firm no's or villains were Ross and Don. They were both older. They were both from Alberta, and they, by chance, just happened to be. Ross, when we went to a minimum security prison, a healing lodge, and we had the opportunity to meet with 2 inmates that were, they made some tremendous changes in their life, and they were really great people. And Ross, it turns out, worked about 2 blocks away from this facility in downtown Edmonton. And at Christmas, he was really as moved as Ross would get, because he's pretty rough around the edges, but he was really impressed with these guys. He likes individualism, and these guys are making a change for themselves. So he went there at Christmas. We shot in August. He went back in Christmas, and he dropped off gifts for those 2 gentlemen to support them and help them, encourage them on their journey. So as much as something like that never really came across in the show, that is just that little needle shift for a guy like that, where he's now thinking, well, he might not see it in the big picture, but he's like, well, these 2 guys, they're okay. They're good, and that kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
That was kind of...
And I think you seem to take care in the story editing to have moments where you could still see the humanity and the potential for change. I mean, at the end of the 3 episodes, sure, some people hadn't gone as far as I had hoped, but I felt there were moments throughout where you saw where at least there was hope. How important was ensuring there was hope in the storytelling?
I mean, it was what the show is about.
I mean, we couldn't make the show if there was no, if we had gone halfway through the development, I mean, I knew there would be hope, but and there wasn't hope, we couldn't have made the show. It was just, it's too huge for everybody to not have had hope.
Yeah, and I mean, we obviously really highlighted those moments and wanted to show, because I mean, that really was, they would have, that moment would suddenly really swing them over, especially for the 4 that moved. They would have one connection with one person, and oftentimes it's just a personal connection that they'd have, and suddenly they might get the similar form of information, but coming from the right person in the right way, suddenly they had a whole different view of things. And the coolest part of the whole experience for me was when they had a light bulb went off, and they started to see that the way my worldview was wrong, and I didn't ever consider this or see this, and then they started using that knowledge against the others. And I shouldn't say against, but and I guess in a sense, suddenly they started becoming advocates instead of they just kind of switched sides, and it was really, really cool. And that created the best moments of the show, when the group kind of basically turned on each other, and then forged these new conversations, and it was really exciting.
I liked your...
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Michael. Well, I was just going to say on that note too, on as much as with the change thing, Jamie Sue was touched so fundamentally that she went back to Muskrat Dam and worked in the addiction center for the summer or for a month or something, right? First,
yeah, she went back to the treatment center.
A treatment center.
Time at and spent 6 weeks as a counselor there.
Yeah, so she was so profoundly moved and felt a sense of human connection and that understanding. So it was like you take the good with the bad, right?
Thinking about hope and thinking about villains, I think one of the things that made this TV experience so exciting for so many Indigenous people is we don't get to watch TV where Indigenous people are the heroes. And First Contact, every community you went to, you saw First Nations, Métis, and Inuit heroes. And they were regular people, just like me, just like Genelicious in the audience there, just like the young people that we work with every single day. And I just thought it was so beautiful that our natural way of being as Indigenous people was elevated to the position of hero when everyone in that show was simply adhering to the teachings that we've always been taught. This is how Indigenous communities are. You know what I mean? And so I really loved watching a piece of television where it was First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people that had the moral high ground. And I was like, yeah.
So, having been the first contact of First Contact, what surprised you most about the entire journey once you got to see the series?
I think for me, what was the most surprising in all of this was I think that element of having the group turn on itself. That was really exciting for me. I didn't expect that, especially because I had only seen them on day one. And I didn't identify out of those 6 people. I didn't say, oh, there's some hope in this one. That was not my experience. But I was luckily proven wrong, and there was hope in some of them. But I just think it was very, I didn't understand the gravity of what we were doing. All I knew is this is an opportunity for me to represent the North End of Winnipeg and urban Indigenous folks in a positive way, in a strength-based way. And that's kind of really what I leaned on. And I didn't actually have hope. I was just trusting that these guys weren't going to screw me over. Seriously, and there's a real hesitation for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people to work with media of any kind, because too frequently media reinforces, right? It's poverty porn. It's only showing the negative side of things, and I really think it's important for us to get away from that crap. So it caused me a lot of nervousness, but because I have faith in Angie Lamarand, and Angie Lamarand had faith in these guys, it's like a chain of relationships, okay? So to me, this is what I see in a lot of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. You can't get anything done unless there's like a chain of relationships that verify that this is actually a good human, all right? So my chain of relationships was Angie, these guys, and then I said, okay, I'm gonna do it. But it's because, again, you're going to hear this in every First Nations, Métis, and Inuit community you go to. The importance of relationships is what's going to determine the direction of any creative project.
And I remember hearing about Michael's hesitation, and instantly I was like, nope, he's gonna do it. He's gonna do it. I know we're gonna be able to get him to do it. Then I conveniently had a baby and left for a few months. But I was like, Steph, get him to do it. You just gotta make sure he knows this and this and that, because I know. I'm like, he's gotta believe us. He's gotta believe us. And in terms of what you're saying about the nerves, when I had a short mat leave, so when I came back, I was watching the footage, and I had watched the casting as well when I was away, and then I came back and just in time to get all the footage coming in. And as you're sitting watching it, the first assemblies were very, very long, of course, and I'd get sick, and I'd be texting Stephanie, and I'd be like, well, we fucked up, this is awful, what are we gonna do, and why did we do this? And then you'd have a moment where the community members would start to speak. And Michael obviously at first, and then it slowly was this train of this grace and this way of speaking that was loving and connecting. And then we would start to feel proud and be like, we can do it. We can get us all through this. And the pride was, waiting for those moments was what got us through watching those hours and hours of assemblies, was knowing okay, after we get through this segment, someone from the community is going to step forward, and we're going to be so proud, and they're going to have so much grace, and they're going to just fill our hearts. And that's what kept Stephanie and I specifically going through that story editing process, because it was hard. And yeah, you don't want to let people down who've agreed to do this. The wait was unbelievable, unbelievable.
Has casting for season 2 been easier in some respects or harder in some respects?
For the Indigenous people or the non-Indigenous
or
people?
both?
I found it to be pretty much the same.
I think it was.
I didn't find it easier or harder. I think we knew, obviously, we knew a bit more about what we were doing, but in terms of the casting process on both sides, I thought it was very similar in terms of the process.
And strategically, you talked about these moments where the group was divided, and were essentially trying to sway each other's opinions. I noticed in watching it strategically, you frequently split them up into groups of 2 or 3. Was that to help facilitate that? Was that something you learned from the format, or was that just a happy accident? Or
no, it was definitely something that was provided, again, the format. It was immediately, I was able to recognize it is extremely valuable because it allowed us 2 things. One is we could cover more ground. 2 is it allowed us to choose if something were to happen. And 3 is we could tailor people, a certain group together for a certain experience. Because again, having knowledge about the hot buttons for our participants, or again, wanting to target a specific opinion, we knew that we wanted to connect them with certain people. So that was something that was really important. But I also learned, just as a production note, is to make sure if you're going to do that, make sure if we had 6, so make sure you do 3 and 3, because I did do 4 and 2 on 2 occasions, and it completely screwed me up in post because, you'd have that extra person that would say, I couldn't have this group of 3 and then cut to that same person in the other group of 4. So that was keep it balanced, but it was really valuable how it worked, actually.
In watching the series, the legal considerations and the risks were of particular interest to me as a producer. There was a moment, I think in episode 3 in Calgary, where one of the female characters was getting in a van with a gentleman who had a history of violence, and you played that story. Incredible ending to the story, so you'll all have to find it and watch it to find out what the ending is. I'm sure you can assume. But what did you, from a production point of view, I'm sure there were a lot of risks you were taking and legal considerations you had in mind in setting up a scenario like that and then letting it play through.
Yeah, in that particular scenario, which was a vehicle ride along where we were doing live pickups, real pickups with, we didn't know, we were picking up generally homeless people or people that needed a ride to go from point A to point B. In this case, we're picking up a gentleman who had a history of violence that was going from a hospital to a shelter. And we had one of our young female participants ride along with him. And we really put our hands in the people that ran the program. So working with them, we ran into some situations where they said, nope, we got to do this one on our own. But they felt confident because they knew him and they knew that it would be okay. This is, again, coming from them. But what I'd seen with them, having dealt with them, I had a lot of confidence in what they were doing. And we, again, in order to get to where we needed to get with this show, we had to take certain risks, and that was a calculated risk by putting our participant in that situation. But that's really what it was, and it paid off in what was a really one of our show's best moments in terms of breaking down a myth or a stereotype about someone. So it was really nothing more than just trusting the people that we were working with.
Now, so you shot 28 days in a row across the country?
28.
28 days. You cut 3 hours of television. How was that for you?
It was a living hell. I think the first thing that I said when I came back was I called Vanessa and said we need to do 6 episodes because we have amazing material. Obviously, that wasn't in the cards. And I think what it did was it really forced us to get down to the real nut of what we were, of one specific thing in a scene. There were trade-offs. Michael can attest to this, and sometimes the choices that we made in the Ed Suite maybe weren't always the right ones, but we did our best. But for example, Michael when he came for his opening scene, he had a smudge. He had one of his colleagues do some drumming and singing, and very traditional way to start. And I didn't use it. I didn't have time, and I'm a white guy. I'm saying that we don't have time. I'll save that. That was a real life experience, but I didn't include it. And that was the first thing Michael said to me. He said, well, how come you didn't use the drumming and the smudging? That was very important to me, my culture. And there are several moments like that I look back on and say, it was just really hard to try to make those choices. So to get everything in, I can tell you that through, again, my journey and my understanding about Indigenous culture and people that I've really gone through, because this, speaking for me personally, was a very life-changing experience. And I with season 2, looking at things a little bit differently with that, because there are many occasions where that happened on a number of occasions in different ways. So trying to find a way to recognize that while still within the scope of the show, but trying to make 45 minutes of programming when you have a 3-minute opening that plays on every show. You're down to 42, 41 after credits, and so it's tight, man. Oh, it's really tight.
And we also, I know I thought a lot about, we treaded the line between, is our audience the Indigenous audience or is it the non-Indigenous audience? And it's pretty clear who the audience is. And in cases like that decision, you have to get those people, once we had them in, I used to say, I just want to trick white people into watching APTN because, they'll see that, it's not just, for Aboriginal people, it's not just, and so I just was we just have to trick people into tuning in and then they'll see whatever and everything will be right with the world. I used to, whatever. And it's okay, well, we have them in. So now we had to be kind of cutthroat about those decisions because we knew we were going to have ceremony later too. We knew they had other experiences and it was we got to keep them in now. Unfortunately, that's the line you have to tread as someone obviously with sensibilities towards culture, but also wanting to make TV that's going to make these people who never watch what we make keep tuned in. We got to make change somehow, and it's going to have to unfortunately be a little messy at times.
And I know that was tough for me, and that the reason I did bring that up as the very first thing, was because I'm that's freaking important. Even though we're young people, I think it's important, especially on APTN, for our knowledge keepers and those that came before us to see that young people are picking up those traditions, like smudging, like welcoming people in a good way, even if we know that they're known racists, giving them our medicines and singing a welcome and honor song for them. And we had that very first meeting on a medicine wheel at the space where we have Meet Me at the Bell Tower, where young people are trying to stop violence. And so for me, it was absolutely critical, on camera or not, for us to begin that way, because those are our teachings. And I just think, even though I know our teachings don't always fit into the script the way that they need to, I always view relationships and connecting to media opportunities like this a chance to flip the script and a chance to challenge the way that things maybe need to be in storyboarding a television show. I think that it's still also important to show that young people are empowered by the teachings that they receive. And so that's really what we were trying to represent at the beginning. Understanding, of course, the barriers and whatnot. A lot of what we did wasn't for TV, and I imagine within a lot of the hosts, a lot of the things that went down were those First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people fulfilling their responsibilities and living and walking those teachings, not because the cameras were on, but because that's who we are. And so, again, look at all these Indigenous heroes everywhere. It's beautiful to see.
Jeff, you mentioned this was a transformative experience. Will you tell us a little bit more about why that was for you?
Well, I mean, I grew up in Winnipeg here. I grew up in the south suburban neighborhood. I knew very little about Indigenous culture growing up. I was introduced to it mostly working with Eagle Vision, producing, directing sharing circles for Kyle Irving and Lisa Meaches, and so I developed a lot of knowledge through that, and meeting Indigenous people, Manitoba Festival, things like that. So I felt I had a really good knowledge and grasp of what it meant to be, having a relationship with Indigenous people and things like that. But then going through this it just showed me how little I really knew and what I really truly understood. And going through when we were doing the visits in advance with the communities and meeting with people, it was extremely emotional. I found it was just, I had a lot of guilt that I had to go through, and different things, and just shame that I wasn't more aware. And actually, it was an Indigenous elder, Rick Lightning, and when we were in Alberta, that told me, that kind of let me off the hook, and he said, listen, you're doing the right thing here. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't worry about anything else. Just keep doing what you're doing. And he had this really simple way of helping me at that time, and it was instrumental in helping me get through the show, just those simple words. And I don't know, it really altered my whole viewpoint of our country, the worldview that we have as non-Indigenous people, or that we're brought up with, and it just has completely sort of affected me and reshaped me, where I'm now. It was just more than a show for me, I guess. It's changed me. So I want to be more of I want to do something. I want to be more proactive in terms of that. So, and I'm not an activist type person. Yet, but but I guess I feel more like I need to be. So I don't know. It was a very really, really powerful experience.
I just want to say, before, I know we're running short on time, but I just want to really honor that you said that, because even listening to you say it again now, and this has been a really emotional journey for us as a team, but just hearing you even articulate that, like, everyone in this room has had partnerships and works with different people, and we're all characters, and we all bring our own, shit sometimes, but like, the fact that the stars aligned and allowed us to have this relationship with someone like Jeff, who, as Michael said in the trailer, came with an open heart and always listened to us when we gave feedback and when we were struggling, and someone who went in the field, and he could have been a real other kind of director about this, and he could have been telling us about, and like he said, about Indigenous people being wary about working with the media, and I still struggle with this to this day with partnerships, and it's always a journey from when I started out 20 years ago, and you get in a relationship and then you realize that this person is like totally just colonizing, your whatever all over again. And the fact that we had this relationship is a gift. It's a gift, and we're lucky, and it tells me that we did things the right way, from going to the Australians and working with them and honoring the process. But I just, back to honoring Jeff, like, that is, you should be really proud of that openness and of the lack of ego, and because that's a special quality, and it's crucial for people like us, I think, for positive relationships.
You're gonna make me cry.
Michael, was the experience transformative in any way for you? Sorry, I told you I wasn't going to ask you any hard questions.
I know, you said you weren't going to ask me hard questions, and here we are. I don't know if it was transformative for me, no offense. I think more than anything, my participation in this show I saw as a platform. And I'm a self-described opportunist. I have no qualms about taking advantage of opportunities as they appear before me. And I do that because the realities of the young people that I work with are life and death for these Indigenous young people and their families. And so if I can take an opportunity and either raise more awareness, reposition myself, build more relationships, then that's exactly what I'm going to do to ensure that our young people and Indigenous folks here in Winnipeg have networks, relationships, helpers, in order for us to deal with the multi-systemic racism that literally kills people in this city. So for me, I don't know that I would describe this as personally transformative, but from a positioning perspective in the world, definitely people listen to me more now because they're like, hey, aren't you that guy from First Contact with the sunglasses? And I'm like, yeah, that's me. But for me, I really do think that participating in this show has really positioned me and the young people I work with in a much stronger position to be able to call out systemic racism. And so I'm excited about that. I'm appreciative of the platform. And while it may not have been transformative in the way that I see the world, because I feel like I'm just going to keep on doing the things I've been doing, I now get to do it with some more helpers beside me to hopefully clear some more of those barriers out of the way so that I can kick more ass and take more names.
And Vanessa? What about the experience for you?
Just to continue to be strong and be brave, I think. Just sometimes it's so hard. It's so exhausting, and watching things that happen in the community, things that happen personally, things that happen to loved ones, and it's so tiring and you just want to not have to do it anymore. But the sad thing is when you have, this blood in your veins, you can't stop doing it. You have no choice, unfortunately, and that's tiring and hard. But that at the end of the day, as Michael said, we have these opportunities to make change, and it's worth it, and it puts a little more gas in your tank, and it's just another day to be strong and be brave and keep fighting the good fight, not be tired.
Thank you. We maybe have time for 1 or 2 questions if anyone in the audience has a question. Yes? Thank you.
My second question is, will there be a kind of a reverse first contact? And have you ever thought of that?
As in taking Indigenous people from communities to white communities, in a sense? I don't know. I hadn't thought about that.
I don't feel like white people need any more favors. I don't know. I don't know. I just
I just feel like that's Indigenous people every day.
Yeah,
in a sense, yeah.
But for TV.
I mean, maybe, we do think a lot about next steps, and just, I don't know if this was going to be a question, but Michael is working with us on a curriculum to bring more education. We're working on season 2. There's another potential form of the show in the works right now that is not what you're suggesting, but I do think that as we move forward, there are opportunities to look at different ways of treating the subject matter, and that we did do good with the subject of racism alone, and that certainly there are situations where different communities can get involved. So, I mean, nothing's off the table, but right now we're really focusing on getting that educational component out, because the long view of the show in terms of people wanting to use it for learning tools and stuff has been great. So we're thrilled that Michael's on board with us for that. And then Jeff's got his head down working on season 2. But no, I mean, I think you're right in terms of there are lots of different ways we could take this treatment.
I just have one more question.
Sure. Can it be quick?
Yeah. Really quick. So I heard that you gave psych assessments for the white people.
Yeah.
What was done for the Indigenous participants?
We weren't as concerned about having we were really concerned about violence and people not changing and stuff for the non-Indigenous people. We didn't have those concerns with our Indigenous hosts. We certainly had aftercare in terms of, we did do follow-ups and stuff to make sure that people were getting the proper care they needed and that people had resources and stuff. But in advance, we didn't vet people because we were mostly seeking out community members who already had a reputation, who in some cases we already knew, who tended to be activists and open to teaching and educators. So we didn't have the same concerns. So we didn't do any vetting of them beyond the meet and greets where we traveled to see them and made sure they would be comfortable being exposed.
Thanks. And let me thank all three of you for participating in this. I want to thank you for your honesty up here today, and I want to thank you for First Contact. I was one of those people that for the first time watched an entire series on APTN, and I thank you for that, so sincerely.
Oh, and can I just say quickly that like APTN and the work that they're doing, like it's no joke. No other Canadian broadcaster, with the exception of TVO, who came on bravely and a little bit blindly and very trusting, they came on as well. But without APTN, the show initially never would have had been seen by you. The mainstream broadcasters were not interested for obvious reasons. It was really scary. But you know what? Like, getting back to just be strong and be brave, guys. Like, let's just do it. So, you know, bless APTN and the work that they hopefully continue to get to do for having faith in us. Like, I really had to complain and whine sometimes to, like, it's gonna be okay, don't worry. Meanwhile, I'm like in my office shaking and like, but like, so APTN is the only place we found a home, and we really thank TVO for also coming on board with us and having faith in us. So let's just all thank you for saying thank you, Jeff, for watching it for the first time, and let's all just be open to what we have to say and support them.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.